everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Crypto Chats. Today I want to talk to you guys about chupacabras. Now, I know that a lot of the tales of chupacabras have been considered hoaxes, and in general, the chupacabra is more known as an urban legend than it is a cryptid. But regardless, I still want to talk about it because it's made such an impact on American pop culture. That I think it's really important to dive into, regardless of the fact that it is not really considered a cryptid anymore, if that makes sense. So let's get into it. So before we go too far into the origins of the chupacabra, I want to talk a little bit about the description of it. So over time, we've had two main descriptions of what this creature looks like. I think the more well-known one to people who are really into cryptids and urban legends is the 3-foot tall, scaly green, reptilian-looking version of the chupacabra with the big eyes and the 3-clawed hands, and basically just looks like a Komodo dragon that decided it was going to eat goats. But there is also another version of the chupacabra that is reported occasionally, and it's the one that is most known in reference to pop culture. So this version of the chupacabra is essentially a wild dog type creature. Isn't just necessarily a wild dog, but it looks more like a dog with mange. It's more like a, I don't know, like a mammal. It's not a reptile. And it's, I don't know, has fur. It doesn't look like, what a cryptozoologist or someone who's really into urban legends or a folklorist might consider the chupacabra as, like, the scaly, alien-looking reptile creature. It's more like a dog with mange. And, I talk a lot about how in some cases, like, people see things and they're not quite sure what it is, so they just kind of jump to a conclusion about it, and like that's kind of I think what has happened with the chupacabra a lot of times, especially in the southwest region of the Americas where they have wild animals with mange running around through the desert. I think it's easy to jump to that conclusion in that case, and to kind of like get that description of the creature going. But yeah, so those are the two different descriptions that we have of chupacabras. Just keep that in mind, because most of these incidents that I'm going to talk to you about are in reference to the second type of chupacabra, the one that resembles a dog more. And there's only ever really been one single report of a chupacabra that was reptilian in nature. But we'll get into that in a little bit because there is some important backstory for that one. So the first ever reported attack of the chupacabra was actually in March of 1955. A farm owner came out and noticed that 8 of his sheep were all found completely drained of blood with 3 puncture wounds around their chest area. That's like a pretty common thing that we hear in these chupacabra sightings, and it's interesting because the word chupacabra literally translates to goat sucker. In this case it was sheep, but I don't think they really discriminate against any sort of livestock. It's just free food hanging out there and they're gonna go for it. But keep that idea of like completely drained of blood and the 3 puncture wounds in mind, because that's a very common recurrence in these sightings, and it's like very standard for this kind of creature attacking. So our next big sighting comes from 1955 as well, except it's a couple months later in August, and in Canovanas, Puerto Rico. This is the sighting that kind of launched that idea of the chupacabra being a weird reptilian creature, right? So this one is like kind of the starting point for that description of the chupacabra. So we have Madeline Tolentino, and she sees this creature that she ended up describing as being this reptilian description that we have of the chupacabra. She said it was 3 to 4 feet tall, had really big, weird, buggy eyes. Its 3 claws on its hands, and it was like green and scaly, really reptilian looking, spines on its back. and just generally freaky looking. That was the description that she had given. That was one of the first ever descriptions of a chupacabra that was reported. And that's what she gave us. And that's where that image of the chupacabra being a reptilian comes from. And in Canovanas, Puerto Rico, 150 farm animals and pets were found, killed in the same way as I had previously mentioned, drained of all their blood with 3 puncture wounds in their chest, which is crazy. That's like a lot of animals. That's a lot of animals dying. And I don't have a time frame for that. So, that could be over 20 years, that could be over, 5 days. I'm not really sure. But 150 farm animals and pets, that's a lot. Like, that's feeding time for one animal, like I said, over 20 years, or a whole pack of them in a couple days. And it's interesting because when she reported this, she had only seen the one singular chupacabra, and that's how she reported it. So it kind of makes you think, like, what actually happened to these animals? The most interesting part about this sighting by Madeline Tolentino, too, is that later on she had mentioned in another interview that she had been watching this movie, and I am blanking on the name of it, but there was a movie that had just come out in this time period in 1955 that featured some sort of like reptilian creature that was attacking animals and people. And she had just seen that movie previously. And so, over the years of her being interviewed about this report and this sighting, people kind of started to piece together that, like, she had just seen this movie and then she saw something she couldn't really explain, and kind of just put them together, because her description of the original chupacabra, this reptilian creature, was almost to a T the same creature from this movie she had just seen. And when she was interviewed about it, she had said that the movie had given her nightmares and that it really unsettled her. She was really freaked out about it. Now, that does not explain 150 farm animals and pets being drained of their blood and with these like weird puncture wounds in their chest, but it does at least explain the description that she gave for this creature, because like I said, when you go through these reports, that's one of the only times that you find anybody like describing a chupacabra in this nature. And so, that report wasn't written off, but that description was written off, and that's why a lot of the art and pieces featuring the chupacabra that we see now don't always have that reptilian image of it, and instead it's more of a wild dog looking creature. So after these first couple of instances happened, we started getting more reports popping up all over Central America, down into South America, and then also the southwest of the United States, of chupacabra attacks. In Moco, there was a string of similar killings of animals in 1975 that they ended up calling El Vampiro de Moca. Mocha. No, I was right, Mocha. Sorry, I'm like, you can tell I only know English because I am uncultured. But anyway, that was, supposedly the chupacabra that they had kind of renamed for their own local happenings. And then from 1975 on, there were killings in so many countries. We had things in El Salvador, Panama, the US and Mexico, Peru, Brazil, Argentina, the Dominican Republic, Chile. So many countries started reporting the same kind of attacks on their animals. And no one could ever really figure out what was happening to them. As with a lot of, situations where there's animals dying or any sort of, I don't want to say ritual involved, because I don't believe that this is really a ritual, but I feel like when animals are involved in killings, mass killings like this too, with like really high numbers, people you know, we all knew the satanic panic happened. We all knew about that. And we all know that sometimes people get a little weird about it nowadays. People really jump to being like it was satanic cults. Like, had to be. It couldn't be anything else. It was definitely satanic cults, which for me is always an eye roll. I just don't. I don't think that this many killings spread over this amount of time can all be contributed to satanic cults. I, I just. I don't know. I feel like that at the time was a very easy thing to jump to for people to be like, great, solved, figured it out. It was satanic cults. But in reality, I don't think it was. I don't think, in this point in my time, in my life, I don't have like a very solid opinion on what I think was killing all these animals because I just don't know. And there were a lot of theories about it being wild dogs and other wild animals, coyotes, which is all fair and well. I'm sure some of them were just other animals. But the thing that gets me about this case and this specific instance of animal killings is the 3 puncture wounds thing. Because to me, that doesn't seem natural and doesn't really coincide with any other animal that we know that is capable of doing things like this, like coyotes or wolves or even feral dogs. And like I guess it coincides with the Chupacabra, but again, the Chupacabra was one of those things that ended up being more of an urban legend than a cryptid ever. So I don't know. I have never officially formed an opinion on these instances of killings. I just don't know. I just don't know if I think anything about them other than they happened. I don't know. I think there's just a lot. Anyway, there were a lot of conspiracy theories about what the Chupacabra could have possibly been, and I think some of them are really funny. So we have like the standard like, oh, it was a wild dog, which like that, yeah, some of them probably were. You know, a lot of the reports of Chupacabras in the United States especially were literally just boiled down to coyotes with mange. Which kind of checks out when you look. I mean, I said this at the beginning of the video too, but when you look at this description of the Chupacabra, it does fit in with that description of a wild animal with mange, whether it be a feral dog, a coyote, whatever. So that was one of the theories that conspiracy theorists gave as to the origins of the Chupacabra. Another one was a genetically modified vampire bat. And I just want us to all think about that for a moment. Because these creatures, from the people who have, you know, laid eyes on them, whether they were a wild dog or a green scaly reptilian, they're 3 to 4 feet tall on their hind legs. And I want you to just picture what you know of a bat. Because they're just not that big. So this one just kind of makes me, I'm just like, why? Like I get being like, oh, they were draining blood, vampire bat, duh, connection. But the rest of it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, then we have, this one is I think probably my favorite. There is a theory that the aliens, you know, extraterrestrials, came down to visit to see how us humans were getting along, and they left one of their pets here. That theory really only applies to the reptilian version of the Chupacabra. I mean, I guess it could apply to the other one too, but realistically, with like the way people view aliens and the way that they have kind of, Hollywood has portrayed them, it makes a little bit more sense for it to be the reptilian one. Left as a pet. I just think that's so funny. And there were some like alternate theories that go with that one, that it was left here to like gather information on humans. So it was left on purpose, and like some theories were that it was left on accident, which is sad. That one's just sad. Like that's upsetting. Like imagine if you like left your dog somewhere by accident and then you never found it again because, I don't know, the humans were mad at it. I don't know. Anyway, That one just is, I think, is wicked funny. It's like, I don't know. It's just hilarious to me. The last like big conspiracy theory that was made about the origins of the chupacabra is that there was an alien animal hybrid that was made by NASA. So NASA took the time to take an alien and take an animal, shove them together, and just let it loose. That's my favorite part about it, is that like, yeah, I mean, I guess like depending on what kind of conspiracy theorist you are, I guess that could make sense. But like, how did it get out and start killing, thousands of friggin' animals? It's like so, I don't know. I love a good conspiracy theory. I do, truly. But sometimes they make my brain hurt a little bit, and this is one that definitely makes my brain hurt a little bit. It's very like, it's much like one of those kooky, government alien conspiracy theories that like, I don't know. I don't want to get too far into this because I feel like I'm going to send myself down a weird rabbit hole if I start talking about the government and its relation and alien conspiracy theories. So I'm just not going to do that. We're just going to move on. Okay, so this is really interesting because the chupacabra seems like something that is only kind of surfaced in the early times of our existence, which I think a lot of cryptids feel like that too. I think a lot of them feel like they've only ever existed in past years. And like this does still count as a past year because the year is now 2020 and this was 2018. But in December and October of 2018, in India, so that's, we all know that India is not in South America. So India, they start reporting that domestic animals, so pets, dogs, cats, that sort of creatures, animals, and chickens, poultry, chickens and turkeys, are being found dead in the same manner as these killings that were related to the chupacabra, which is interesting to me because in my research, I didn't find really many other countries outside of the Americas that had a problem with animals dying this way. So it's crazy that like of all the places that, you've got the Americas over here and everyone else is over here, of all of the places that it could have ended up, you've got India. Like that's nuts to me. And it's crazy too because it's the same general manner of killing, the 3 puncture wounds and the essentially bled dry. It's weird too. Well, I mean, this makes sense. That's kind of the thing. I've talked about this in a lot of my videos, that everybody jumps to being like, it's dogs, it's bears, it's this thing. So experts in India, they chalked it up to be wild dogs. But again, it still doesn't really explain the 3 puncture wounds. That would be great. But yeah, so I still don't really know where I stand with chupacabras. You all know, I want to believe in just about everything wicked badly. And sometimes I don't know. I don't know. As something that is, considered at this point to just be an urban legend, I think it's definitely fair to at least, the very least, call it that. But I periodically revisit chupacabras just as a concept, and some of these like mass animal killings. And it leaves me scratching my head a little bit because I just don't have much of another explanation for what's happening to these animals other than, you know, to stay true to my heart and say, oh yeah, no, that was some weird unknown creature. Or an alien, because I also do that a lot. But I just, at the end of the day, I don't really know. I do want to hear other people's opinions on it, though. So if you have a theory or a thought or a feeling about chupacabras, and if you know if you think that they're a real tangible creature, or if you don't think that and you think that they're just, you know, a hoax or a myth or whatever, leave me a comment, because I really, really do enjoy hearing other people's opinions on these kinds of things, especially in a case like this that's been leaving me scratching my head for years now. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please follow, please subscribe, give me a like, leave me a comment, and yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you stick around, because next week I'll have another one for you. Thanks so much. Bye!